One Shabbos, after I had given a class in shul in a synagogue, a young man came over to me and said, "This is interesting, but how do you know? How do you know that there's a creator? Maybe it just evolved. Maybe it just happened." Now, he was pretty passionate about what he was saying, so I picked up a siddur, a prayer book, and I said, "Here, let's open this up, and let's look inside. Let's say I were to present to you the following argument. This book just happened. Last night there was a truck. The truck was driving down the street, and in the back of the truck was a large drum of ink and some paper. It was driving to a print shop, and they got into an accident, and ink spilled, and look, this is what happened." Obviously, you'd be a little bit incredulous. Why? Because there are sentences. There's a clear margin. All of the letters are equally spaced. There's space between words. And more than that, you could read it and it makes sense. Clearly, someone wrote this. Clearly, it was designed. I wasn't getting too far, and he didn't really hear what I was saying. So I said, fine, let's take this a little bit further. Let's say I really presented to you the idea that this book just occurred. No one designed it. No one planned it. In fact, I'll tell you the story. It was a big truck, lots of ink, lots of paper, and this is what came out. Now, you may have some questions. One of your questions might be, well, what about the punctuation? I mean, every declarative sentence ends with a period, a little dot. Every question ends with a kind of squiggly guy at the end, and there are commas. Where did those come from? Well, I'll tell you what happened. It was really a much larger truck than we realized. And what happened was it was on the highway, and the driver wasn't so careful, lost control, and apparently he spun off and began spinning. The truck itself began turning over and over, and what happened was that the jug of ink just exploded, and it was such a powerful rotational force that sprayed out in a mist, and that's how the periods came about. But of course, not every rotation of the truck was equal. Some of the rotations were a little bit lopsided, and that's how you got the squiggly lines to the question marks. Oh, and the commas, ink sort of stopped in midair and fell, and that's how you got the book with its punctuation. Now, obviously, you may have another question. You may say to me, well, sir, with all due respect, each page has a page number on the bottom of the page in exactly the same place, page after page, sequentially, 1, 2, 3, straight through the book. How did those come about? Not a problem. You see, really, I was a little mistaken. Actually, there were two trucks. You see, one was containing the ink, the other had the paper, and amazingly, both spun out of control at the same time. And they crashed into each other. And amazingly, the back of both trucks opened up, the paper went flying into the air, the ink went flying up as well, and it touched the papers because they were all spread out. It happens to be that the mist of the ink just happened to hit each page sequentially, and it just happens to be that it fell here, and now we have it. Now, obviously, if I haven't convinced you yet, I said to this young man, I have one last step. If you open the front of the book, there's an index. Turn to page 67 for this portion. Turn to page 34 for this section. The index is properly laid out. Can you possibly think that a book with page number, punctuation, sentences, paragraphs with an index just happened? And I said to this young man, if you look at the world out there, there's such orderliness, such clear preparation, planning that went into it. There are laws that govern every part of the universe. Gases tend to expand throughout the cosmos. Heat tends to rise. Heavy objects tend to fall. But not just that, organisms. Organisms happen. They don't just happen. Every single cell in the human body is more complex than New York City. And if you study the human body, you realize that H2O is a formula, that somehow it is that hydrogen and oxygen atoms attract each other, and they somehow form this molecular bond. They form molecules, and the molecules somehow create larger entities. And when you realize that cells somehow form into tissues, tissues somehow form into organs, organs somehow form into organisms and entire systems, you begin to realize it can't just be. There's so much complexity. There's so many systems that are carefully designed. It's as obvious as a book is to its writer, so too the world screams out, there was a creator. And I thought that I made a very good point. And I naturally assumed that this young man would be convinced. But he wasn't. At all. I didn't budge him an iota. And I sort of threw up my hands after a while and said, okay, I tried. I found out a few days later that Saturday night, this young man got on a plane to Israel and was learning in yeshiva. But I did the math. Wait a minute. Clearly, if he got on a plane Saturday night, then he bought that ticket before Shabbos, before the Sabbath. That means when he was speaking to me, he already had plans to go to Israel to learn in a yeshiva. Clearly, he's not an atheist, yet he sure was speaking like one. So what was going on? And I got it. I understood what was happening. For whatever which reason, he didn't want to hear. Whether he was playing devil's advocate or whether he was actually believing it, the point is his ears were closed, his mind was shut. The reason why he didn't hear my arguments wasn't because the arguments weren't substantial or well presented. It's because he didn't want to hear them. And I learned one of those great life lessons, and that is that if a person doesn't want to hear, guess what? They won't. The world itself screams out to a creator. And one of the greatest ways to see our creator, to see the wisdom of our creator, to see the goodness of our creator is to study the world. But there's one caveat. You have to be honest. If you walk into the exercise with the following premise, I don't want to believe in God. Don't confuse me with the facts my mind has made up, then nothing will convince a person. Nothing will change his mind. I cannot prove to you that George Washington existed. I can't prove to you that the Magna Carta was signed if you really don't want to hear. However, if a person walks into that very same exercise with one simple criteria, my mind is open. I don't know. Let me see. Let me play judge and jury, but without any agenda, without bias. Let me just ask my mind, what do I see? If a person is objective, the person is self-honest, he'll see such wisdom, so many systems, so much that's out there that he will clearly see the creator. But a person has to have that objective, walking and being honest. When a person does that, he sees such wisdom, such harmonious systems. He sees his creator daily in his life, in everything in existence.